Hello, everyone. I am Mariana Peavy, and I am the Grant Loan Bureau Chief here for Idaho Department of Environmental Quality. And Charlie and I will be doing this presentation today. I'm just going to wait a couple more seconds, give a chance for everyone to hop on. Please note for those attending, we do have your mic and cameras turned off. At the very end, we can turn those on if you have questions that you'd like to ask. Otherwise, you can put that in the chat. This meeting is being recorded. We are going to send everyone who's in attendance a link to the recording, but you will also be able to access the video on our DEQ YouTube page. There are a group of SRF videos, and this will be added to the SRF playlist on the DEQ YouTube page. Otherwise, it's 1 after 11, so I will go ahead and get started. But again, this is being recorded. Please put all your questions in the chat. At the end of the presentation, we will open it up. You will just need to raise your hand and we can unmute you so you can ask questions at the very end as well. But today, what we'll be going over is just general updates in the intended use plan that we put out for public comment. We'll go into a little bit detail of what is in the intended use plan. And we'll also speak about the legislative supplemental funding that we have received this year. We received $10 million. So we'll go into a little bit of details of what we are doing with those funds that the state legislators allocated to the Grant Loan Bureau for this next fiscal year. All right. Again, we do have our intended use plan and also the work plan of the implementation plan for this legislative supplemental funding on the DEQ webpage. And we will be putting links to the intended use plan and the supplemental funding in the chat, so you guys will have access to that. And we are accepting public comments through May 16th. And definitely that is part of the link that you'll receive, not only being able to access these documents, but also to add your public comment as well. Now, this is not a, just know that this meeting is not a public, any questions or comments that you make in this meeting will not be added to our public comments. You do have to do that through a formal public comment submittal. This is just an informational meeting and not a platform in which we are obtaining public comments. So please note that you do need to formalize any comments that you make if you want to from this meeting. Now, in the intended use plan, we do have in there how we intend to fund money from our drinking water state revolving fund money and our clean water state revolving fund money. We also have within there additional priority lists and fundable list for the drinking water emerging contaminants funding and for the clean water emerging contaminants funding. Now, one thing that we did a little bit different this year as well is that we put the drinking water planning grant priority list within the intended use plan, along with the wastewater planning grant priority list. Usually those used to be standalone list, but we thought, instead of having you guys try to hunt down those lists, we try to combine it all and put it in the intended use plan. Now, we also put the list for the supplemental funding in the intended use plan, but the implementation plan is a standalone document, so that one is separate, but you will be able to find the priority list within the intended use plan as well. Now, just to note, when you get to those lists, we do have an executive summary at the beginning of the intended use plan with links going directly to the fundable list. So you do not have to scroll through the 50 odd pages of the intended use plan. We did put in links to get you there directly. Now, we did want to show and go over a little bit of the funding outlook for state fiscal year 26. Now, for the planning grants, we will be putting out $700,000 for the planning grants. $350,000 will be directed to the drinking water planning grants, and $350,000 will be directed to the wastewater planning grants. Now, for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, we have looked with the recycled dollars and with the grants that we plan on receiving. We will have about $48 million available to put towards new construction projects. Now, a couple things here. I'm going to stop here and kind of discuss this a little bit. Now, this base grant, we kind of have it separated out. We get 2 grants currently from EPA for the clean water SRF projects. Now, what we call our base grant is the grant that we've been receiving for over 30 years from the feds. This is our usual allocation that Congress has appropriated to us every year that we usually put out. Now, that appropriation amount can change yearly, so we never know exactly where it's going to be. Now, right now, we're anticipating that grant amount is going to be around $7.7 million, that base grant. Now, this is an estimate. We don't have the final amounts from EPA. They just recently received the funding, and so then it takes them a couple months to line out exactly how much is going to every state. So this amount here is 7.7 is a ballpark that we kind of came up with based off of what we saw the appropriation amounts were going to be nationally. So this amount is not exact. We're still waiting. We don't have the exact amount. We don't know when we'll get the exact amount. But we think we're a really good ballpark area of what it's going to be. Now, as many of you know, we are also receiving money with the EGF funding, or the bipartisan infrastructure law funding. They had appropriated 5 years of funding several years ago. And so we do know that we'll be getting $12.2 million from the bipartisan infrastructure law funding. This money will be the 4th year of receiving bill funding. We'll have 1 more year of that funding, and then that will, as far as I know, will go away. This was kind of a once in a lifetime 5-year push to fund infrastructure or boost infrastructure funding in the US. And so right now that will go away, but we do know the amount for our state fiscal year 26. I'm anticipating that we'll get our last year's appropriation for the bill funding, but as far as I know, that is not a guarantee like we had anticipated before. So I do know for state fiscal year we will get it, but again, I'm not too sure what will happen after this next fiscal year. For the clean water SRF emerging contaminants, we will have a little over $1 million available. We didn't expend all of the funding from uh, from fiscal year 25 for the clean water emerging contaminants. So this amount might increase to $1.5 million. But right now, we do know we have 1 million, and there's a chance that it'll be bumped up just a little bit. For the drinking water state revolving fund, what we have available for new projects is $30 million. We have been really aggressive on getting funding out for the drinking water projects. And even though we're anticipating these two grants coming in, we couldn't fully appropriate those out because we had some carryover from loans from previous years. So again, with the base amount for the drinking water SRF, just like the clean water one, this is an estimate. I don't have final figures from EPA for this funding. And so again, this is an estimate. I hope to get the final amount, but I do think I'm somewhere in the ballpark. We did get the amounts for the bill funding for 24.9 million, so that should stand. So I again anticipating getting those grants. For the drinking water emerging contaminants, we have $7.6 million available for state fiscal year 26. And then for the drinking water lead service line replacement, we have $22 million remaining from a previous grant we got in. We have not allocated out all of those dollars, so we'll be taking the grant that we've already received and be putting it towards the projects that submitted letters of interest for state fiscal year 26. Now, the amount that we received, we request over probably around $10 million were requested of us for that lead service line replacement. So all of those who submitted a letter of interest, if you qualify for that funding, you will be you will receive money. Again, I do have those dollars in, so I do know I can fund the lead service line replacement projects. Now, I'm going to go back and talk about the other funding where it comes to the bill funding, whether it's the emerging contaminants funding or if it's with our regular SRF program. Now, we are in a situation, and the reason why we've kind of had to reduce a little bit of what we're getting out for drinking water SRF money is that we are having a difficult time receiving the money from the feds. So there is a base grant that we applied for last year that we still have not received the funding. Now, for next year, we are going, as soon as this intended use plan goes through the public comment and then is voted on by the board, DEQ board, and approved, we will apply for these funds from EPA. That being said, I'm not sure how long it's going to take for us to receive this funding. So for all of you who are on our fundable list for state fiscal year 26, we will not be able to issue you a loan offer until we receive the money from the feds. Like I said, we're still waiting on some grants from last year, and we're going to keep moving along like we have every year. But because there's been a slowdown or some disconnect on us being receiving these grants. We're going to have to be careful on issuing out any loan offers for next fiscal year until we receive these grants. In addition, you will see on the fundable list that we mark down whether you qualify for principal forgiveness and not putting down the exact amount that you'll be receiving in principal forgiveness. And a couple of reasons why is one, we don't know exact amounts for some of these funding with the base funding, so that can affect how much we give out in principal forgiveness. In addition, again, we want to make sure we get the grants in hand um, before issuing out how much principal forgiveness that we'll be giving out. And so those who are on the fundable list, and once this IUP is approved, just know we will work with you. We'll go through the application process like we usually do for the state revolving fund. We'll get everything done, and as soon as we get the money, we'll issue you the loan offer. And we will also communicate with you and be as transparent as we can of what we anticipate you'll be getting for principal forgiveness. So you can have that for planning purposes. So and this is the case for both drinking water and clean water SRF. Now, we haven't received the, last year, we still haven't received the drinking water SRF base grant, but I'm moving cautiously with all the grants because they do have to go through the same process. Now, this grant that we haven't received was a grant that was not issued before the new administration came in. And so we have been working very closely with several people in EPA to try to access that money. So if it goes anything like we've been experiencing the last few months, we are again going to kind of move uh, slowly and cautiously with our funding. We will, again, we'll issue out the loan offers as soon as we get the grants, but this will be requiring a lot of communication between our staff and the communities receiving money, so we can make sure we learn how to kind of navigate um, um, the funding stream, and so you guys can plan with your projects accordingly. All right, and again, with the state supplemental funding that we received $10 million, and we'll be going over that a little bit more later. I pretty much went over a lot of these issues. Again, delayed on funding. Principal forgiveness is contingent on what we will be receiving and when we receive it. And for future funding, we definitely wanted to also just point out, in which I already kind of did, is we're keeping a pulse of what's happening with our regular SRF base program. We do know that there has been recommendations to cut the program, and we also know that rural development has received major cuts as well. So we just want you to know, as the SRF program here and advocates for all of you and all of your funding needs, we are speaking closely and advocating for the SRF program, and we're also working within the state as well to come up with solutions with the uncertainty with the funding of the SRF in the future. A couple things that I do know is I still have the revolving nature of the SRF. So all the loans that we do have, we're getting repayments. So that funding is going to continue, even though we don't have the we may not have the needed push that we need from the feds to meet the gap. And I'll show you a little bit more here of what we're seeing as the funding gap wise. And again, I did go over what we're anticipating of having for the State Revolving Fund along with the Legislative Supplemental Funding. Now, the demand, we're still seeing projects come through for state fiscal year 26 that exceed $1 billion. So we still have a fairly large shortfall on meeting the demand. We're close to meeting 10% of the demand. With that, do know that we're being very vocal about your needs, and we're putting out a report to the state legislators that we partnered, or we're having University of Idaho develop, to show the demand for the state and the needed support for infrastructure funding. And again, this just kind of shows, we had kind of a consistent growth of demand for both the drinking water and the clean water demand. And, we had a spike in 22, but the demand has continued. So we have that slide. And with that, just know that we're continuing to try to bring in funding to address this. One thing that we'll be doing probably around September timeframe is putting on another training in which, while you are waiting for funding, we wanted to give you all some resources and tools of things that you can do to what you could do in the meantime as you wait for some funding to come in for your projects. And so we want to continue to be a resource for all of you and help support your projects, and also help find ways to get your projects funded. All right, and I'll go ahead and pass it over to Charlie.
Hello, everybody. My name is Charlie Parkins. I'm the grant loan supervisor for the grant loan program. As Mariana mentioned, the IUP. So most of you know that we work on an annual basis. We get different pots of money, we get different funding amounts, and so we put this into the IUP each year. The IUP is actually kind of a tricky thing to put together, as we need to put information out there that the EPA needs to see. We know there's the information that the systems want to see, like the rates and terms and principal forgiveness and all that kind of stuff. But the IUP does contain a lot of good information, so it is a good resource for everybody. You'll see the fundable list in there, the priority list. If you're looking for emergency funding, you'll see the criteria for emergency funding. You'll see short-term goals, long-term goals, everything that Idaho DEQ plans on doing for the fiscal year is contained within that IUP. So that is out, like Mariana said. It ends, or the public comment ends here on Friday. And so that is up for everybody to see. As Marianne mentioned, the planning grants are usually a standalone document that we put out. This year, we combined them with the IUP. I think this is actually the second year where the IUP is combined, in that we have the drinking water and the wastewater all within one IUP. Historically, we used to do separate IUPs, but now those are all combined into one IUP. So again, we have $700,000 for planning grants to develop facility plans and environmental reviews and all that kind of stuff. So it's contained within the IUP. So you'll find that there. Also, I wanted to mention the planning grants are still a 50-50 share. And so be sure to make sure you're paying attention to the asterisks and hashtags and all that kind of stuff, because those are important. Usually means if you're getting funding and any other kind of caveats that might be included with that specific project. One other thing to mention on the planning grants, on the drinking water side, there is a max of 45,000 cost share, and on the wastewater side, it is a max of 65,000. The other pot of funding that we have is the lead service line. So we're a couple years into some of these EJA pots now, so I'm not really going to discuss what they're for because I think that's out there already. If anything, I'll probably discuss, or I will discuss, kind of lessons learned. Um, the first one on the lead service line of lessons learned is we're not getting a whole lot of flexibility as far as what the funding can be used for. It's strictly for lead service line piping and the few other things that are allowed. There is a principal forgiveness component with the lead service line. Again, it's for the inventory and replacement. One key thing that we're running into is the inventory needs to match the replacement. So if your inventory shows no lead service line or anything like that, then it's going to be difficult to put out any kind of lead funding for replacement if the inventory shows zero. And so that is one thing that we're learning. So the inventory needs to match the replacement as far as the construction side of things for the lead service line. Again, it needs to be full replacement, no partial replacements for lead service line. As Mariana mentioned, we do have quite a bit of funding available for this, and so those that submitted a letter of interest and qualified should receive funding, and we'll send out the fundable letters to those. So that's the lead service line funding. The other pot is the emerging contaminants. Again, lessons learned. The demand for this is increasing a little bit. So that was good to see. We were a little hesitant over the last year or two if this was going to take off. Again, this is 100% principal forgiveness, but it is for emerging contaminants. One of the lessons learned is it's not so much to a fishing expedition to go looking for emerging contaminants, but this is for systems that are popping hot for an unregulated contaminant. And so that's what this pot of money is for. Again, you'll find both the drinking water and the wastewater list in the IUP. So that's really it for the emerging contaminants. As Mariana mentioned, we did receive $10 million of legislative supplemental funding for the projects this year. If you're around for ARPA or the Leading Idaho funding, we basically plugged that money into the same criteria or very similar to the past few years. It seems to fit well into the existing system, and so we just plugged that funding into our 2026 system. So if you submitted a letter of interest for funding, we just marked you as wanting any of the funding that we had available, one of those being the $10 million pot of funding that we got from Legislative. Again, it's directed for small and disadvantaged systems, and so you'll see we have a list there of the systems that were eligible, under 10,000 projects that are ready to go, 2% of MHI, and again, systems that submitted a 26 LOI. We just marked you as eligible for receiving that if you ranked high enough. So that's the legislative supplemental. So as you can imagine, $10 million doesn't go as far as it used to. We have heard rumblings that we may continue to get more funding each year, but I think that's still to be decided. But for the 2026 session, it basically went to the top systems that are also receiving the state revolving funding. So if you ranked high on the SRF program, then those will be the same systems that receive the legislative supplemental. What we try to do is pair this money with the normal SRF funding so that it rounds out an entire project versus just partially funded projects. And so the 10 million went quick, but any good additional money is good. So it just went to the top systems for the 2026 IUP. Next steps, the public comment period ends here on Friday. So as Mariana mentioned, if you would like to make a public comment, please go to our website, or I think Jade actually put a link in the comment section to do that. Commenting here during the presentation doesn't count as a public comment, so do be sure to make a formal public comment if you choose to do so. Right now, the IUP that you see online is just a draft. Things can shift around, so be sure to pull that up after the DEQ board approves it. That'll be later on in June. Once the DEQ board approves it, we will send out letters to everybody that submitted a letter of interest, letting you know that either you fell in the fundable range or sorry, there's not enough money to go ahead and submit a letter again next year. And so that will be kind of the next steps over the next few months for the 2026 IUP. Deadlines. So we will be sending out the fundable, non-fundable letters. On those fundable letters will be some key deadlines. The first one being just to confirm with DEQ that you do plan on submitting an application for the funding if you fell in the fundable range. Things do change, and we realize that from the time that systems submitted a letter of interest to, July. Sometimes they get funding elsewhere, maybe a bond doesn't pass, and so they wouldn't be eligible, or plans just change. But we do want to confirm with the systems whether you do a plan on submitting an application so we can actively manage the funds. Obviously, there's a lot of demand. And so if a system is opting out, we want to give the next system down the line as much time as possible to get everything they need to do to get an application in place. And then again, we like to have the shovel-ready projects, so facility plans, environmental stuff like that done. And then a due date of March 31st for a full application submitted to DEQ. Again, that's just so that if systems opt out, we can actively manage that list. It's unfortunate when we try to give as much flexibility to the system as possible, and if they end up opting out at the 11th hour, it doesn't give the next system down the line much time to get everything they need for a full application into DEQ. So again, there'll be some key deadlines on those fundable letters. Please pay attention to those key deadlines and abide by them so that we can actively manage the list and work our way down if we need to. And again, that is it. I will go ahead and open it up to questions for the public. And just go ahead and raise your hand and we will unmute you, or if you can unmute yourself, go ahead and do that.
Right, Charlie, there was one question in the chat that I answered, and they were curious on how to get on the priority list. Now, the deadline for the state fiscal year 26 has passed, but every year we do make our letter of interest for the next fiscal year available in probably mid to the end of October. And then those letter of interests are due by mid-January. And then we rate those and put them on the priority list for the next year. We try to keep all our deadlines the same every year, just so you are aware, and we try not to change our process too much, just because this is a huge learning curve on trying to access funding. So we'll keep those the same. And all right, and Christina, I think we allowed for your mic to work. So what question do you have?
Awesome. Well, thanks, Marianne and Charlie, for the information. I'm really grateful for the legislative supplemental funding, and I have a question regarding that. And I did hop in a few minutes late. I apologize. Maybe you already addressed this, but I am just curious if there were kind of some thoughts from your team on utilizing more of that money towards the planning efforts instead of the project efforts, and kind of so if you already addressed it, I apologize, and I can get that later from you, but if you could just talk through that, I'd love to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah, we did not use it for planning. That was something that I had inquired about. This legislative supplemental funding was not something that was driven by the Grant and Loan Bureau. We kind of heard about it as it was getting approved on. And the intent language is, from our understanding, was to put it out towards construction projects. So that is why we didn't put any of the funding out for planning. Now, I think their thought is too that they did put in there that they're this would be over 5 years, that they could appropriate funds over the next 5 years. I don't know if there's an option to possibly change that at all. I'm unaware, but as of right now, you know, we only have 350 available. I think we can open up talking about putting more towards planning, but right now we're having definitely a hard time just meeting the construction needs. And so there is a little bit of being just consistent and thoughtful of what we're putting towards planning, because I'm also concerned about how we'll fund those projects once that planning effort is done. But I'm more than happy to pass along information that we would like to access some of that money in the future. I think especially if we have funding cut on the SRF side with the base grant, then we do need to have a little bit of conversation of going, can we have some money towards planning, because those grants are also how we're funding the planning grants. And so we do know there's a possibility of that being affected. So we definitely want to be thoughtful on the planning side. Now I see a question here. So one thing with all of especially the planning grants, just so you're aware, I think this will answer your question. You asked if you're down lower on the list and there's only 300 available, essentially, how does that work? Are you on the waiting list? And how it works is we'll have the whole priority list for both of the planning grants. So if you look at it and there's a line showing, essentially where the cutoff is, that we have $350,000. Now, one thing that has happened every year, or how we handle it, is that any of those that are getting funded, they have a deadline in which to say they are for sure interested in the money and they're going to apply, and then also a deadline to submit an application. Now, if we don't receive those, what we'll do is then go down on the list and go to the next person and say, hey, we had someone who was getting funding, they're not moving forward this year, and we go on down, and essentially we work the priority list that way. We'll be doing that a little bit, as much as we can, on the construction priority list as well. That one's a little more tricky, because all of you do have to get debt authority. So one thing to keep in mind, if you get debt authority, that's probably a smart thing to do, even though you might not be in the fundable range, because if someone who is getting funding, if they can't get a bond pass, we will go down and try to get the money to someone else on the list, because we do have deadlines in which we need to allocate out those funds. Now, that being said, we do this throughout the fiscal year. We don't carry these lists on to the next fiscal year. So if you're not in the funding range, what I would suggest is to submit another letter of interest, and between the October-January timeline for next year's as well, to make sure you get on the waiting list for next year as well, if you're don't get funded. But please know that we'll be working with the funding as much as we can. And next question here that I see here is, what are the 2026 requirements to qualify for disadvantage or lower interest rate? And that is set, it is in our intended use plan how we determine that. On the fundable list, you will see a little box where we say you qualify. So that means we've already vetted you out and you do qualify for principal forgiveness and a lower interest rate. I already put in the lower interest rate for those who qualify for a disadvantage, qualify for the disadvantaged community definition. But a good threshold to have a good idea on whether you qualify based on our current rules is if your user rate is above 2% of the median household income for your community. So, and that user rate does also include debt service. So whatever you have to take in for debt as well. So you definitely will have to adjust your user rate to pay us back. So we keep that in mind as well. But that's kind of a good threshold. There's some other folks that may qualify if they're in between 1.5% and 2%. And we look at your unemployment rate and population decline to see whether you can qualify if you're in that range as well. But that is how we figure whether you're disadvantaged or not. But we have done that for everyone on our priority list, and there is a column that says qualifies, and so that means you are considered disadvantaged based off of those rules. And another question here is if we would make changes based off of public comments, for example, with the Legislative Supplemental Funding. Absolutely, go ahead and submit a public comment. We'll look at that. One thing I do have to tie it to is what the intent language is in the Legislative Supplemental Funding. I think it's pretty clear. It goes to just a new construction project, so that is not something I can change if you do say want it to go to something else, but we will verify that and adjust your public comment and outline where that language is. So definitely don't hesitate to make a public comment. We will consider anything that's submitted. We do take a lot of things into considerations, but we're more than happy to reply back and let you know what our process was on whatever we decide to move forward on. And on the there's another question here in the comments in regards to what are the differences between fundable list and priority list, and does all the applicants on the grant list get funded? So for the SRF projects, we did separate a fundable list. So those are the ones that are going to get funding versus the priority list. And the priority list is everyone who requested funding. So we put them on there and how they were rated during our rating system for through the letter of interest. So we do have the priority list and where you can see where you fall. Now, the one list that we combined, both the fundable and the priority list, is the planning grants. We may change that for the loans in the future, but just know for the planning grants, there is a fundable section. So you'll see a line and a bolden line, and anyone up on above that bolden line is a fundable project that we will be funding. Otherwise, everyone else below that we're just letting you know where you land. Now, there are a couple lists. So I think with the Clean Water Emerging Contaminants Fund, it's a combined list because the demand correlates with similarly to what we're being funded, along with the lead service line replacement list. But other than that, there's different lists. So look at the top of the list to see whether it says fundable or it says priority list. But again, fundable list is where you're going to see whether you're getting funding. And don't hesitate to reach out to us if it's unclear. We're more than happy to work with you and show you what we're looking at. I saw a question here on what source does DEQ use for the median household income. We did put down, we use a census reporter on making that decision. And please note as well that as part of the letter of interest submittal, we were given by those who submitted the letters of interest pretty much the breakdown. I forgot, census track is what they call it, the census track for your community, your system. And so we use the track that you submitted with the letter of interest. With that, we did vet those tracks. We definitely double check. We like to make sure there's consistency through all the letters of interest of what is being used. I have a question here in regards to tribal projects, and through the State Revolving Fund program, we do not fund tribes. That would need to go directly with EPA. They are the ones that are funding those projects. And yeah, I can definitely, if you're not getting the information you need from EPA, I could possibly connect you to who's overseeing that with EPA to answer your question there. Oh, you have another person. All right, August, I think you can unmute your mic and ask your question.
Hi, thank you, Mariana. I'm curious, is the September 2nd date for the application, is that the application that you're speaking to if projects that have been funded don't turn it in? Is that the date that we will know if we're high on the waiting list? Like, I guess I'm just asking, if you're high on the waiting list, like the city of Driggs is, when would we maybe know about if the possibility?
Yeah, with that one, actually, that September timeframe, and Charlie can verify with me, but that September time is just communities having to tell us whether they intend to apply that are on the fundable list. So and then they have another deadline in which to submit an application. And the date in which they submit the application is in March. But you know, a couple things, like, I mean, some of these projects, definitely, I want to clarify, if the bond doesn't pass, you know, we'll have to have that discussion on who's ready to proceed. And that is something that's kind of required as part of the application package. So we do take that into consideration. So definitely, you know, for City of Driggs, please keep us informed on where you're at and if your bond passes, because again, if bond doesn't pass for those who are above, you know, our group takes, I mean, there would have to be a good reason why maybe we would extend that out for those who did not have a bond pass in November. In addition to making sure they have enough funding for their full project. That is another consideration we have to take as well. And okay, and it looks like a few more comments came in. So for the legislative supplemental funding, there's a question here. It says, if the bond doesn't pass, can you still be eligible for the legislative portion of the funding? And we are treating the legislative supplemental funding very similar to how we treated the ARPA funding and the Leading Idaho funding, in which we needed to make sure or ensure that that you have funding for your full project. So essentially, we want to make sure we're not funding, we have to be good stewards of the dollar, and that we're kind of not funding a project to nowhere. The other thing is how systems were put on our priority list was based, the point structure was based on the full, that you were going to be doing the full project. And so I kind of lend that there's some question marks there, because definitely if a community can show it's like, okay, our bond didn't pass, um, but we were able to get another grant from another location that could pair up with the legislative supplemental funding to fund the project, then we can do that. So, and that doesn't necessarily need a bond. So if we have a good plan in place that can allow us to know that we can still fully fund the project, we'll proceed. But again, we do need assurance that uh, again, the full project in which they submitted the letter of interest for, there is a plan in place to fund that full project. And as for the next question, how do you challenge a census income evaluation for median household income? Now, if you guys have a rate study, is that what it is? Income survey that's done in your area, and you can show that the census is not reflective of your community, you can submit that, and we can use that instead. But this is going through public comment and approval, and so in order to allocate principal forgiveness, it needs to be in the plan. So if you could get that during the public comment period, that would be great. So definitely get us the information on the income evaluation. We do accept other forms if to show that your median household income is different. Definitely, it can't be a guess. Like, we think it's only 30,000. We do need to have evidence, but if you could provide evidence, we're more than happy to accept what is, what is reflective of your community. And that is a good comment too that Christina put, just a comment on the census. It can change. When we pulled this data, and I think it changed right after a submittal. So we did pull the most up-to-date submittals. So I think it changed in January. So if you submitted your letter of interest in December, we didn't just use the number from December. We tried to do it consistently, that everyone used the new rates that came forward in January. All right, and then Margaret wanted us to look at another slide here. Okay, so the question here is, could you please review the funding outlook slide again, and what is going on with the SRF funding, money not available, and how has this affected principal forgiveness for both fiscal year 25 and 26? So actually, it did not affect principal forgiveness for state fiscal year 25. That was put in our intended use plan, and we're issuing out the funding as set in the plan that we had for state fiscal year 25. Now for 26, the reason why there's a little bit of questions is that the base amount that we have here listed for both the clean water and the drinking water SRF, those are estimated amounts. So, so for example, if I end up finding out from EPA that the grant is actually $5 million, the amount of principal forgiveness is tied to what those grant amounts are. So all of a sudden we could be giving out, maybe $1 million less in principal forgiveness. And so we did not, since we did not have these final numbers to put out for the draft intended use plan, we did not put in final principal forgiveness amounts. And then again, as we receive these grants or receive the final amounts, we can make sure our principal forgiveness amount is correct, because again, it's tied to these grants. And then that's when we will know for sure what the principal forgiveness amount will be. Margaret, did that answer your question? Okay, wonderful. I'm going to pause there to see if there's any more questions. Okay, it looks like it's slowed down, but thank you all for attending this informational meeting. We will follow up with links for this presentation. So if you want to refer back to it, it will be available to you. Again, you can submit comments on our public comment page, but in general, if you have any questions at all, on our public comment page, it does have our grant and loans email in which you can direct questions. And there's a lot of people here on my team, but Jade, who oversees that email, will make sure it gets to the right person so your question's answered. All right. Thanks, everybody.